and for kind words, particularly about Canada. I want to also thank Joanne for the tremendous leadership that you provide. The Centre for Global Health and Diplomacy does phenomenal work. It brings together people from a variety of backgrounds and tries to bring focus and attention to important issues that desperately need it. My job as Canada's Foreign Minister, I can say, can be summed up quite simply. My job is to promote Canadian interests, and my job is to promote Canadian values. And that is something that guides me each and every day in my job. And the significant issues that arrive around the world, human rights, freedom, the rule of law, are tremendously important Canadian values. Human rights are important, and far too often people think that there's an either or, that you have to look at your country's economic interests and weigh them out against your values. And we work very hard to have a balanced approach, and sometimes that means speaking truth to power. Sometimes that means raising issues which make people uncomfortable, and that's something that I'm not shy about doing each and every day. I don't believe there is a thing called women's issues. I want to tell you an important thing that I can remember in 1995 when Hillary Clinton spoke in Beijing and talked about women's rights being human rights and human rights being women's rights. And in those two phrases, she perhaps best summed it up. I never would have imagined that many years later, in 2011, that I would be working with Hillary as a fellow foreign minister. And it says a lot that even after Hillary has left the State Department and left active public service for the time, and I should tell you I'm a conservative, she has had a huge effect on the world and on the political discourse that we have. Since she left office, we have seen William Hague, the British Foreign Secretary, again a conservative, take up the issue as part of his G8 presidency against rape as a weapon of war. And there's no doubt that Hillary had an influence there. And since Hillary departed, I have begun, and I say that, begun, to take up the issue of early and forced marriage for young girls. These are important values, and it's not just about human rights. It's about development, and it's about economic growth. And I want to talk briefly about early and forced marriage. There is a time, I think, in every struggle where you've got to stop fighting the fire and start taking away the matches. And in far too many places in the world, and I won't single out a particular country or a particular region, you see young girls, some as young as 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, forced to marry against their will. And when they do, the first thing that happens is if they were in school, they're not in school. They're not prepared to start a family. They're not prepared to have that type of relationship. They leave school and they lose the benefits. And what we see is a vicious circle where these young girls who are not old enough to be mothers become mothers, and the cycle repeats itself. And so this becomes not just a human rights issue, not just an issue of values and morals. It becomes an issue of development, where these young girls don't have the capacity to be able to be a proper parent. Far too often, they have to deal with so many other challenges, whether it's becoming HIV positive, whether it's having other public health issues. And the cycle repeats itself and repeats itself and repeats itself. And I think it is tremendously important that we begin an international conversation that this practice is wrong, and it's unfortunate that it's uncomfortable in many countries and in many societies. And in many respects, it's an important issue for governments, not just Western governments, but for all governments around the world, to talk about. I was at the Commonwealth Summit in Perth, Australia, and this was the first time the issue had been brought to my attention, and Canada was pushing for a statement, just a one sentence in the communiqué, to condemn early and forced marriage. And as was said in the introduction, this issue makes, in some societies and some cultures, makes people feel uncomfortable. And I was asked, for the good and the success of this summit, would Canada mind backing down and being quiet and going along to get along? Because there was a few countries which felt deeply uncomfortable about our condemnation of early and forced marriage. We're talking early and forced marriage. This leads to rape because a 9-year-old girl doesn't consent to having sexual relations. And this is one of the first international summits that I attended in my first 4 or 5 months as foreign minister, and I thought about it. And I paused and I thought, if Canada's not prepared to stand up and speak to this issue, who's going to? This issue is going to make some uncomfortable. And the only thing I can say is we need to start talking about it more and more and more often so that people learn to become comfortable speaking about it. And we have at our first event as a side event at the United Nations General Assembly, the high-level portion. And the more and more people that I talk to about this issue, the more and more support that you obtain. We got the development minister from the Netherlands, who became an enthusiastic supporter, the new foreign minister of Italy, who was becoming a champion. When I raised it, I raised it with the foreign minister of Ghana. And this is a woman whose background is primarily in trade and economics. And she immediately signed up. She paused and she said, and I know this is even a problem in my own country. And what we need to do is to continue the conversation and develop an action plan. We brought forward a resolution at the General Assembly that received overwhelming support, which was what I call a tremendous good step. But what we need to do is to develop an action plan to get this issue raised and to bring governments along, and just as importantly as bringing governments along, to bring societies along. Because this isn't going to be changed by governments alone. It's not going to be changed at the national level. It's going to be changed street by street, community by community, and country by country. There are no magic bullets on development. But if there were to be 3 or 4 of them, one of them would be an end to this practice of early and forced marriage. It is about ensuring that we respect human rights. It's about ensuring that we focus on development. And I said, use the example of stop fighting fires and take away the matches. And then finally, it's about ensuring if a country, and I think of Malawi, I think of Mali, I think of Ethiopia, I think of India, if these countries are to reach their full economic potential, I use an analogy quite often on a variety of issues. You need, in Canada, if we're going to be successful, we need to get our economy firing on all 8 cylinders. And you have 4 women and 4 men. Those are 8 cylinders. And we ain't going to fire up on 8 cylinders unless we take advantage of the full potential of each and every country. I had an opportunity today to attend a conference sponsored by a luncheon sponsored by the UN Foundation. And they had 2 young girls who were ambassadors. And one is an Ethiopian Canadian. She was born in Canada. Were you there? Okay. She was born in Canada. Her name is Hannah. Her parents came from Ethiopia, but she was born in Canada, and she's now a special ambassador to Ethiopia. And it's funny, she's 15 years old, and she probably speaks better than any doctor, any foreign minister, any development expert, and it's truly inspiring. And we've got to start a conversation and start an action plan and make a commitment. And we can do this in a generation. To end this terrible practice of early and forced marriage. And the benefits, you can't even count them. Human rights, development, health, economic. And we are so excited to have the support of the Center for Global Health and Diplomacy. I can tell you that Joanne and her organization have given some good advice. There's a tremendous group, and I'll say this and then conclude, a tremendous group out of the UK called Girls Not Brides. And it's a group that Canada is very supportive of. The chair of the group is Princess Mabel of the Netherlands. And Canada is very committed to working with friends and partners and governments, in non-governmental organizations and businesses, and in governments around the world to put a focus on this issue and to see what we can't do to bring results. This is something that will have an immediate effect. We had an event at the United Nations on the side event I mentioned earlier, and there was a young girl. she was almost forced to marry at age 11. And one person in her life, her aunt, intervened and stopped that reality. And you think of the things that this young woman will accomplish in her life. And because of that simple decision that one person intervened on her behalf. And we look forward to working with many in this room and many around the world to bring focus and bring action to stop this terrible practice. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure. Merci beaucoup.
Do you mind taking a minute?
No problem.
Minister, while we have you, I know your time is short, but I would like to take some questions from the audience. We do have the live stream audience, so the people that we asked to speak, if you could please take the platform. Professor Muhammad Yunus, who needs absolutely no introduction. I'd actually like to ask you a question following what Minister Baird said. And to end the practice of early and forced marriage, we need financing. And you are an elder and you are an expert in this field in terms of how we develop financing mechanisms. So if you could please, give us a brief comments while Minister Baird is here on how, we would go about doing that. And also, I just, if you can yourself, with all your expertise in this field, pose a question to Minister Baird while we still have him for a few short minutes. No?
What we try to do, financing in a general way, to reach out to people who remain unreached by the banking system. We created a system which runs on its own strength called microcredit. We built a bank around it called Grameen Bank. We loan money to women particularly. We have 8.5 million borrowers in Bangladesh alone. 97% of them are women. This is now about 40 years that we are running that bank and grew, and now it's spread in many countries, including Canada, USA, and others. We run bank in New York City and several other cities, same branches, same style, same methodology. The point that you're making about the adolescent girls getting married and so on, what we have done all along, right from the beginning, to make sure they send their children to school. And for that, whatever income needed, we'll finance them so that the parents can have, the mother can have the income to let the child be in the school, particularly girls, to stay in school. And luckily, we succeeded. Every single child in Grameen families are in school and went through the school, high school. Now getting into the colleges, we started giving them student loans so that they don't drop out. Said, money is not your concern, you continue. So as long as they remain in school, this is a deterrent to get them married off, because they are they're being financed, mother is being financed, and higher education is being financed by the education and so on. We created something called social business to solve problems rather than make money for anybody. And we created nursing college to bring this young girl to become professional nurses so that they remain in education and become professional people. So every time we see a problem, we try to create a social business to solve the problem. This is one, to keep them engaged and make them useful in a healthcare system so that they can go out. A series of clinics we have created, again in a social business basis, so that these young girls can be employed. One of the things we do, apply technology so that the pregnant woman even doesn't have to leave her home. With a small tablet with ultrasound, these young girls are trained to take the images and send to the doctor. And the doctor looks at it and says, and makes a phone call, because Bangladesh now has mobile phone. Everybody has a mobile phone. So we use that. Now we are trying to see how mobile phone can be used to all diagnostic services at home. Nobody has to come to any place. That's where the technology part comes in. And we are training these young girls, high school girls, college girls, to take up this technology and deliver at home. The girls can communicate with this pregnant women than anybody else from outside, because it's a very conservative society and they don't want to discuss about pregnancy to anybody else. But these girls are village girls and they can do that. So it's self-employment and a professional service. At the same time, it's a finance through this mechanism that we call social business. Thank you.
I can't say anything more than I completely agree with just about everything you said.
Thank you so much. I know, Minister, you're...
But again, it's not about girls and women. It's about wanting a society to take advantage of every single member of that society. And you'll never fire on 8 cylinders if you don't even, if you push aside 4. We'll never reach our full potential as a society. There's no such thing as half the world's human rights. So it's tremendously important, I think, for us to take this conversation to a different level. It's not about gender, it's about making sure that every single person in this world can reach their full potential. And that's tremendously important.
Thank you, Minister Baird. I know your time is limited. Do we have time for one more question? Is there
These are tough questions.
Is there one more question?
Violently agree with each other.
One more question from the audience?
Somebody else.
He said good things before, so allow him to go again.
So, it seems clear that, Canada is applying values and principles to how you're conducting foreign affairs, and I would think financing and political influence can be 2 of the ways. How else do you foresee Canada can exert the type of influence that can really get countries to change some of the social norms and behaviors that are underlying these problems that we've been discussing?
Leadership, partnerships are absolutely key. I don't mind being critical of the UN when it doesn't live up to the full potential of the Charter and the founding principles of human rights. Secretary General, for example, has done a phenomenal job in providing leadership on the issue of women and girls and ensuring that we place a great focus, whether it's women in peace and security, whether it's rape as a weapon of war, whether it's in child and maternal health, or I could go on and on. Leadership and partnerships are tremendously important. I could talk about Joanne. She is tough, aggressive, focused, and we need more leaders and we need more partnerships, and those are tremendously important.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. As a woman, I really want to thank you for your leadership in this field. I feel like you not only lead in Canada, but you have inspired other global leaders to really look at this topic when, as you say, it's a topic that many people don't want to talk about. So thank you. Thank you very much.